Welcome back, y'all. You know who it is, the voice of the culture. I'm here, back with another great season ahead of me. Starting it off with someone that's just, man, her family is legendary. Her father is the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Willie Burger himself. But today I'm sitting down with the infamous Ms Tanya. And she has done so many great things outside of being just his daughter. She just kept the legacy going. And we're gonna start off with her beginnings and her story. But first and foremost, Tanya, I gotta welcome you to the round table. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate the opportunity. We here in DC. So just for the culture to understand, we had to run out here and catch up with you, but it was all worth it.
It's all
and
good.
We appreciate the opportunity. But let's jump right into the life, the legend himself, your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Tanya, welcome. And I got one first question I have to ask you. How was it being the daughter of the man, the myth, the legendary Mr. Willie Burgers himself?
Very good question.
And I call him Willie Burgers. You know what I mean? I have to give him that. You know what I mean?
A lot of people call him that.
But how was it as a, the daughter, the child? I know you've seen a lot, been through a lot, saw it all, been behind the grill, been when you was in the building when the lights was off.
Mm-hmm.
How was it growing up?
I would say it was, how can I put this? It was awesome. I would say that. It was awesome because there was never a dull moment with my father.
Yeah, and
it was
that's
never
why I
a
had
dull
to
moment.
ask you that first.
Yeah, he was always the life of the party. He always was, he was a thinker. So he was always thinking about something else to do, something to better himself, better his businesses. So that's just how he was, and I think that I picked that up from him.
Right. As you can see, we have the backdrop, the book, the clothing line, so you just kept the hustle going.
I kept the hustle going.
Now, siblings, how many of you guys?
Well, I have 2 siblings by my mother.
Okay.
And I have 5 sisters, or is it 4? Maybe it's 4 or 5 sisters outside of my father and mother's marriage.
Okay, how many were in the house with you guys? I would say that then.
In my house, just me, my brother Eric, and my sister Sabrina.
Okay, and you are out of the 3?
I'm the youngest.
Wow, I knew that, but the culture didn't understand that. That's why I asked you, how was it growing up, being the baby of the family?
Daddy's girl.
Exactly, you was the one that was in the front seat when Dad was riding around. Now, it started off in, your father came, he's not from Harlem, he came from Harlem by way of?
North Carolina.
Okay. And what year did he move into the Mecca?
I would just say this, what my aunt said was, as soon as he turned 18, he left the South. He took off.
He took off.
As soon as he was of age to leave the South, he was ready.
Now, was your mother from the South as well?
My mother's from South Carolina, my father's from North Carolina.
It's funny how that always comes together.
Yeah, but they met in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow, okay. My parents came from the South together, so it's funny how that generation, that era, everybody kind of rode the wave.
They rode the wave.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So they met in Brooklyn. How was that? Because I know your mother has some stories. I know your father has some stories.
My mother said that he used to follow her a lot in school because she had long, pretty Indian hair, like down her back, and she used to go to the basketball games sometimes, and the boys would play in her hair.
Right.
And he used to creep up there and be watching her, and she didn't know it.
Was he older than your mom?
He's older.
Okay.
Yeah, he's older than my mom. And he would say, when she would be walking home, he would say, I saw them boys playing in your hair. What I told you about letting them guys play in your hair. She said he would say little things like that to her.
So you already had in his mind what he was going after?
Yeah, yeah.
So would you say your father was a visionary?
Yes, very much so.
And I'm just saying that because just a small story about him with pursuing your mother allowed him to pursue his dreams in life. Now as time progressed, your mother and your father, they become one. Y'all in Harlem now.
Yes.
What year was it for you when you realized, as the baby, what was going on at home? Like, Dad's not working, Dad's not the garbage man. Let's just say that, you know, when
No.
we kids, we going to school. My dad's a garbage man. My dad were, and basically back then, the garbage man was everything. So that's why I said that. You know what I mean? Watching that grow up had to be fascinating. You know what I mean? Because it was like your dad was a man amongst people.
Okay, my father was a carpenter, so he was always very good with his hands.
Right.
So when we migrated, when we was in New York, he used to build a lot of things. So he was self-taught, and a lot of things, he didn't never look at blueprints.
Right.
He would go in a room, look around, take a few measurements, and that was it. And he would make it happen.
Okay.
So he was gifted that way. That was his gift.
Now,
his hands.
let's talk about that, because being naturally gifted leads you in different directions in life.
Yes.
And I believe that's where it led your father, because him coming from the South, they always, one thing I learned from my father, they come from the South, but they have an idea, they have a plan. Did your father really tell you the original plan that he wanted to do before he got into whatever it took him to do?
No, but I do discuss parts in my book about, because my father and I were very close. I was a daddy's girl.
Right.
And a lot of people know that. So growing up, he used to come into my room a lot at night and talk to me about certain things throughout his day, how his day was.
Right.
And he used to always tell me, like, if he was going to open up a new business, sometimes he would let me know in advance what he was going to do.
Right.
So he kept me in the loop. Even though I was the youngest, I really didn't know what was going on, but we were close like that.
Right.
So I love that rapport that we had, father-daughter relationship.
Right. That's amazing too, because at the end of the day, it's funny, I would think your brother would have been the one kind of pursuing a little bit more harder, but I seems like you personally with the book, the merch, you popping up at different events that's representing the 80s and the 90s, that the Willies Burgers, as you see, was so epic for us growing up. That culture, it's like you just kind of just pivoted off what your father was doing. And that led you in different directions. And as a young lady, sometimes they don't always grasp that.
Yeah.
You might want to take your own route.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
So as time progressed, I got to ask you this, your father's very first, what was his very first? And let's tell a culture that don't know the spots your father also had. Like, a lot of people just think Willies Burgers. Some people don't know about the other ones, you know what I mean?
He had a lot of them, and they're also mentioned on my Brewington Cloth website and also in my book. His very first business was called Willies Fast Foods, and that was on it was between 111th and 112th Street and 7th Avenue.
Okay.
Which we used to live in 111th Street on the 7th Avenue side, between 7th and 8th, but we lived on the corner.
Okay.
So when he decided to open up his very first food business, he decided to go back to the hood where we were from. And I thought that was a very creative idea and thoughtful idea for him to open up a fast food restaurant in that area, because there was nothing like that in that area.
What year was this?
Ooh, this was back in the 80s. I would say 84, 85.
Okay.
Because I was just coming out of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, after that location, that shut down, and let's talk about Willies Lounge.
Willies Lounge. Willies Lounge, that was back in the 80s too. I can't give you an exact date. That was back in the 80s also. But after the Willies Fast Foods, he was in the process of building the Willies Burgers.
So he already knew he was going to 45th.
He found a spot. It's mentioned in my book also. I'm going to keep referencing my book.
As you should, because we need the culture to understand it. Right.
That book is it. And
please go get the book. You see the drop in the back. It's written. It talks about everything.
Yeah, my book is the plug. There was a man, where the hamburger stand was located, there was a man that used to sit there for years and sell newspapers. And one day we drove past and he was like, I'm gonna put a hamburger stand right there. And I'm looking at him like he's crazy, because all I see is a wall.
Exactly.
So, you know, him being a carpenter and having such a creative mind, he saw things I didn't see.
Right.
So I'm looking at him like he crazy. I said, that man been there for years. How you gonna get that man to move from that corner? He said, money makes everybody move.
Money makes the world go round, especially in Harlem.
So next thing I know, the man I think he started selling newspapers across the street. He moved across the street, and my father started building a hamburger stand from the wall, out from the wall, on the side of like a bodega on the corner.
Exactly. So the thing about it, my question to you was, the first spot that he had, the eating spot, could you eat inside?
Yes, Willie's Fast Foods, yes, you can eat inside. It was like a fast food joint. Come in, get your fish and chips, and whatever you're ordering. Some people ate inside, some people just got their food to go. So he had us all in there. We were all in there.
Everybody's working.
Family, all that. We was all in there.
Well, he knew to keep it in-house.
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked that question, because the infamous Willies Burgers, that a lot of people know now of, and the part that I realized that, you know, I was a part of, you couldn't eat inside.
Yes.
Like, you just had to go there and get it. And I think that was the uniqueness of that whole situation. Because honestly, we didn't know half of the people you didn't know who was behind that wall and who was behind that little glass. But yo, it didn't matter. You know, back then, nobody was skeptical. You know, nowadays, everybody's not going to spots like this. Well, who's behind, especially just coming out of COVID, everything going on. But back then, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the question that I have to ask about the Willies Burger situation is this. He allowed it to go. He knew how long to keep it open as far as late night hours. And I think that was like, that had to be genius to say, you know what, I'm gonna keep this spot open at 3, 4 in the morning.
He kept that joint open 24 hours.
How you running the
he's
staff?
Not
shut. So you mean to tell me y'all never shut, that was never shut down?
Never.
Wow.
24 hours. If it was ever a case where there was nobody there, either there was an emergency or we couldn't really get the help because everybody was burnt out.
Right, because
You know,
let's be clear, those burgers was moving.
Yeah, we were standing on our feet for hours. We didn't have a time shift. We had a crowd shift.
Yes.
That's how we moved.
But your father knew that.
That's how we was operating.
I think that was the most genius part about it all, because no matter what we did at the end of the night, yo, we gotta go to Willies. And Willies, let's be clear, it wasn't just a New York thing. Everybody from my era growing up in Inglewood, yo, we going to Willies, we going to Willies. And at the time, me and my team, we didn't even have cars. But if we can get in the car to go to Willies just to get a burger to say, hey, I'm at Willies. And this is before the Instagram, the social media. It's, yo, you just had to be there. But the thing about it is, it was every time I was out there, I never saw no BS take place out there.
Oh, there was a bunch of
I mean, I'm quite sure it was, but I'm just saying, also the respect for the person that owned it, people paid homage to that.
We were never robbed, never.
Wow.
Never robbed, never. I don't even think anyone even attempted to. Yeah, only one person, and I discussed that in my book also. It was a crackhead. I'm just gonna say he was a crackhead.
Right.
I don't know if he was. Maybe it could just be a man that was broke and hungry.
Right.
And he climbed into the window. And
y'all were closed?
We were closed that day, and he stole the safe that was in there. It only had like about $400 or $500.
Now, like you just said, you very rarely ever closed. So that just happened to be that time.
Yeah. So that was the only time, and I don't know how the hell he got that safe out that window. But
out that little window. Now, you had to be there to understand the window.
The safe wasn't really big, but I thought the safe was bigger than the window. But he got it out of that window.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's talk about the Rooftop. The infamous
Rooftop. The Rooftop was back in the 80s also. A lot of this was going on while I was graduating from high school, coming out of high school. So that's when I started really going over the George Washington Bridge.
Because now you're relocated to Teaneck.
No, we was in Teaneck the entire time all of this was being built.
Okay.
We was in Teaneck, and I discussed like my father earlier years versus when we moved to Jersey, when he came home from jail and he was working, and then we decided that we were going to move to Teaneck, New Jersey. He told us, let's go, and we was out, and we was in Teaneck ever since. So all of this was happening while we were in Teaneck.
Wow.
And what was funny was, not to jump around, but coming from, when I used to also go to the rink and hang out with my friends at the rink, really coming down the block on Teaneck Road, all I had to do was go a couple of blocks and make a left, and I was home.
But you passed that.
But because I didn't want nobody knowing where I lived, except for people that was from Jersey or that knew me, I would bypass my house and go another route and go home. So
as you should, though.
Yeah,
at that time,
you always got to stay on your toes.
Well,
always.
that, you know, that's your father being who he was.
Yeah.
That was taught at home.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That was taught at home. Now, seeing that you're a part of it, and when I say a part of it, you're witnessing, you're hearing it.
Yeah.
You're not blind to the fact of who your father is and what he stands on. Did it ever affect you growing up? Was you ever like, why is daddy never home?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's also mentioned in my book. So it's like a lot of key things you're hitting on. I went there with that book. My book is raw. If it wasn't for Willie, it's raw. I give you everything. This book was therapeutic for me. It was a healing process also for me, because he was never home. He was never home. And I used to always argue with him about that. You're never home. And I know if I argue with him, I can hear my mother sometimes arguing with him, you know, about certain things, and he was never there. But not jumping around, but at his viewing, when he passed away, I got my answer as to why he was never home. So when I was sitting there, it's like a light bulb went off in my head as to why he was never home. Because he was a father to many people. He was a father to people that I don't even know. There were so many guys that stood up at his viewing that I've never seen before. And everyone started out, when they first started talking, if it wasn't for Willie. So that's where I got the title of my book from. That stuck with me. Before they would say anything, they was like, if it wasn't for Willie, if it wasn't for Willie. But it was two young men who really spoke, that really captured my heart. But one of the guys turned around and looked directly at me. And what he said was, if it wasn't for your father, I don't know where I would be, because your father was my father. And he said, and thank you for sharing your father with the world. Because he said, I never knew who my father was. And your father took care of me like a son.
Wow.
And this how you saying wow? That's how I was. Wow.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you really don't understand, you know, outside of home. I mean, I ain't gonna say you don't understand. You might have a little bit, but that love that he gave to the community is priceless. Because like you said, you got these, and these ain't young kids. These are grown men saying this at the time. These are not kids. These are men. Grown men. Not even forgetting the opportunity. And I'm quite sure your father gave plenty of people many opportunities. We not even getting to that.
Yeah.
You done seen a million people come and go.
That's where the story comes from. And also in my book, there was a part in my book where I felt that it was empty. It needed something else. Right. So I thought about it for a few days, and I spoke to my ghostwriter, and I decided for her to interview people that knew my father, that worked for my father. And she thought that was a brilliant idea. Although she did charge me extra for that.
Of course.
But